This particular character trait, if not dealt with in a timely manner, can actually derail your career, your future, and many things that are tied to you. Everyone, welcome to Shifts and Ladders with Ryan Robinson. I'm glad and excited to be with you here today. We're back at home base. We were on the road before with the last pod. But today I want to get to an actual serious topic that many people, particularly in this day and age, actually get confused with confidence. It's actually a character trait, if not dealt with in a proper manner, can actually keep you from reaching levels of excellence, of achievement, because you just don't know what it looks like. You're not aware of it. This particular characteristic is called pride. Yes, pride. Now, there are two prides that we typically talk about. It is the pride that actually you have a level of esteem and a level of confidence about the work that you put out, that you put together, and the work that you put out. That's, you have pride in what you do. You're just proud of what you're doing. But there's another level of pride that is boisterous, that actually says to other people that you really don't need them. And most importantly, pride says that you don't need God. That's a big deal. That you by yourself with no assistance can actually achieve the things that you set out to achieve without any help from anyone. Many of you probably have someone, a friend or a former friend at this point, maybe, that you tried to give advice to. You saw something coming. You said, hey, man, I think or hey, girl, there might be something coming down the way. That person may not be good for you. I wouldn't necessarily make that decision when it comes to my level of employment or whatever the case is. You might have circumstances that are subjective to your friend's circumstance. But what pride tells you, and what pride tells an individual, is that I appreciate the information that you have given me, but I think I know better. Therefore, I don't need your help. That is what pride says. You don't have to say the word, just the actions say it alone. I've done this. All of us have done it at some point, but I'm just going to pick on myself. I've done this where you're like, yeah, okay. And you kind of have this glaze over your face and you're like, yeah. In my mind, I'm thinking, one, you don't know my situation. Two, you don't understand what's happening. I'm more involved intimately with my circumstance than you are. And I just know better. That has been me. That has been me at points in my time. And I will tell you, it has cost me in ways that, fortunately, I've been able to recover from, but most people don't. Most people don't because they're not willing to say that they're wrong. They're not willing to say that they're wrong. And because they're not willing to say that they're wrong, they're also not willing to learn to be better. Now, this is another issue, another point, is that people that have pride usually think themselves as learned, that they've done all they need to do, that they've learned all the books, that they have taken all the tests, they've gotten the gold star on it. Therefore, their perspective can be trusted and they can't trust anyone else. That is in itself egotism and pride at its finest. I'm going to go to the Bible on this because this is an issue that actually cost many people in the Bible their life, their position, and in many cases, all the above. I want to give a definition of what pride is. It is considered an excessive preoccupation with self and one's own importance, achievements, status, or possessions. Pride is considered rebellion against God because it contributes to oneself to honor and glory that only God is due. It is the opposite of humility, which humility being a characteristic that greatly pleases God and one that he rewards. Okay. So many people don't like to be humbled. In many cases, it's like, oh, you're wrong. But no, humility is actually a lot bit deeper than that. Humility says that I don't know. And because I don't know, I need to listen. My dad and my mom actually would tell me portions of Proverbs, which we're gonna dive into a bit in this conversation today. But my mom and my dad would tell me two things. The first one, you can learn from anyone. You can learn from someone who appears wise and has everything together, and you can learn from someone who doesn't have you can learn from someone who doesn't have it all together and one who's made mistakes. You can literally learn from everything. What to do, and most importantly, what not to do. It's also been told to me that you, as an individual, do not have to pay the cost of experience, because the cost of experience is expensive. I'm going to say that again. You, as an individual, do not have to pay the cost of experience. And experience is expensive. Think of everything that you have gone through and maybe your most painful moments that you had to learn a hard lesson on. If you had to learn that hard lesson, it took a moment for you to recover, to get your bearings, to get the dirt off your pants and the dirt off your shoulders. It took you more time to recover. Why? Because the lesson was hard. It knocked you off your feet. It disoriented you in some way or shape or form. It is usually an experience that we don't want to experience again. Now, if there's individuals that are around you in relationship that you have been able to observe go through a particular circumstance, or you have a mentor who has gone through something that has gone ahead of you, you can learn from their experience and not have to pay the cost of experience in your own life. I was also told this particular quote. I'll say it was a quote. It's giving an example, an illustration, if you will. Getting wisdom is like getting the message ahead of time that there is an accident on the highway. Okay. What wisdom does is it actually gives you the opportunity to bypass what most people get stuck in. I'm going to say that again. Wisdom gives you the opportunity to bypass what most people get stuck in. And if you're not willing to take in the information, apply said information in the manner that it needs to be, you will be paying the cost of experience. And I will tell you, the older you get, the more expensive it is. That's why we have when you're young, you're like, oh, they're 20 something years old. They got time. Now, how long are you going to say that you have time to correct an issue? And the older you get, typically the cost gets higher. You might have a family, you might have a career, you might have other things tied to you, a reputation, that if you don't deal with the issue of pride, you will find yourself taking your own legs out and kicking over the chair and actually destroying your opportunities that God has given to you. Why? Because you think you know better. It's a costly thing. Tell anyone who's married. The cost of experience is expensive because wisdom only comes to one who is recognizing that the Bible says this in, I believe, in Proverbs chapter 1, verse 8. It says, the beginning, fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, which means there is a level of reverence, knowing that you are God, I am not. And that means you know everything. I know a little bit. And because I know a little bit, I don't have enough to qualify myself to be God over my own life. But our culture tells us that that is the way to do it. Okay. We're going to go back to the Bible. I just got off a little rant here, but Proverbs chapter 11, verse 2. It says this: pride leads to disgrace, but with humility comes wisdom. It gives way, and this is Proverbs 13, chapter 13, verse 10. It gives way to conflicts and quarreling. Enough said. And here's another one. This is Proverbs 21, verse 24. Mockers are proud and haughty. They act with boundless arrogance. Pride is at the heart of every prejudice. It's the greatest danger of pride because it keeps our eyes on ourselves instead of God Almighty. And essentially it causes blindness and eventually death in career, whatever area you have pride in. It causes some kind of death. There again, I'm using a lot. I'm using many examples and illustrations that I've used or many have used on me. Sometimes you try to help individuals keep themselves from running into a brick wall. They're going full speed ahead. You see the brick wall. They don't see it. They're driving like they don't see it while you see it. And then most of the time, what's crazy about it is that you usually tell someone that you care about, hey, you're running into a brick wall. But they're like, nah, there ain't no brick wall there. I don't know what you're talking about. And then they end up running into it. And running into it may be whatever the above, right? Whatever you're trying to save them from. But you know what's crazy about it is that pride has a way of deterring individuals from actually helping you. Because you're not willing to see you need help, help goes away. There's no need for it when someone doesn't think they need help, help doesn't even arrive. You know, it's that kind of it's that insidious, that blindness to fact that you don't need anyone, that you know all things, creates this level of contrast and challenges. Oh, it's Proverbs 16:18. It says, pride goes before destruction, a haughty spirit before a fall. Okay. There are at least a few examples in the Bible, and I'm going to just use two particular examples that God dealt with in front of people and essentially caused the nation of Israel to have a challenge. The first one, again, there's many, but this one in particular is King Uzzah. And he was at one point becoming a great king. Now, there was a litany of kings, King David being one, Solomon. And then so after Solomon, the quality of kings who had their heart towards God was deteriorating. And many, as you're going through, if you go through the book of Chronicles, First and Second Chronicles, it'll say so-and-so did what was unjust to the Lord, or some that did what was right in the eyes of the Lord. And so they might have done, if they followed the procedures of what the law of Moses had, they did that. Or if they did what was wrong in the eyes of the Lord, they did idolatry. They did all the things they shouldn't have done. And God judged that kingdom during the time of that king's reign. So King Uzzah was one that was starting to be a good one. And over time, he slowly started to believe in his own hype. He started to believe his own press. And at one point, he thought that he could actually do a ceremonial activity without being designated to do so. There were priests that were set aside by God to be able to do the things that he wanted to have done. And they knew the method. They knew the process. They knew what God put in place. Therefore, they didn't need anyone. They didn't need any assistance. The only thing they had to do was when they got something in place, if someone brought a sacrifice, whatever said ceremony was called for, they would execute that. But King Uzzah thought he was above what God put in place. And essentially, what it says here is that he dared to go into the holy of, or the holy of holies, the most holy place, which is in the tabernacle. And he dared to burn incense on the altar of incense. And because of his disobedience and his pride, he was struck with leprosy as a punishment from God. This is in 2 Chronicles 26, verse 16. I mean, you probably want to start the full chapter of verse 26. Now, why is that important? If you know anything about leprosy, it is an extremely painful. I think he got leprosy on his forehead. It's an extremely painful condition. So much so that people were exiled out of the common people because of it being seen as contagious. So the king, imagine this, the king of a nation was not sitting in the throne, but sitting on the outskirts of the kingdom that he was rightfully given. So he was king, but he was king on the outside. How crazy is that, to know that you had been given something, but can only view it from the outside? You can't even sit in your position because what you have done and what you are doing has disqualified you from actually being in the position that you actually may be blessed and qualified to have. But King Uzzah found himself on the outskirts of the kingdom that he led and eventually died. Crazy way that God deals with it. Another, King Hezekiah. King Hezekiah had a proud heart after the Lord healed him, and his pride brought God's wrath not only against him, but also against all of Judah and Jerusalem. Now that is another big one. I don't even know if I have time to kind of expound upon that, but that is found in 2 Chronicles chapter 32, 25, verses 25 through 36. So again, there are several examples of in the Bible by which you see God dealing with individuals who had the issue of pride. Now, why am I bringing this up on a podcast when we're talking about shifts and ladders? Okay. Pride is the very thing that, if not dealt with, can actually knock you off of your ladder. You may be progressing. You may be going up the corporate ladder. You may be going up whatever position you're going into. Your money's right. You're doing all of the things that you're supposed to do, but you're doing them in a way that you think you don't need any help doing. You think that it's all what you have done. You think that you are that good that you don't need anyone, that you don't need any insight, that you don't need any wisdom, that you don't need any consultation, that you just don't need anyone but you. And unfortunately, we live in a culture that really relishes and relishes in the fact that they got themselves there. The hard work that you did, the extra hours and the extra time you've put in on the gym or at work or in studying, whatever the case is, if you think you got you there, you got another thing coming. We cannot orchestrate and coordinate relationships that come our way, the favor that we get in certain circumstances, the things that we have avoided that we didn't know we avoided, like a bad coworker or even if you're going to work, an accident. It might been the fact that if your little toddler is acting up for 20 minutes, it could have saved you from actually being in an accident that actually saved your life. You don't know that. You're not sovereign enough. You don't know the beginning from the end. And that is one of the things that God is a sovereign God. And because he knows all things and we know enough things, we only know what we know now. For us to think that we got ourselves to where we've gotten to is pride in its purest and actually ugliest form. That you're blind to the fact that it wasn't you that got you there, but it was all of this serendipitous, coincidental, which I like to call God incidences, intervening on your behalf that made what you are experiencing happen. I can just say for myself, I've worked hard, but I cannot pretend that I got here by myself. Some people call it the universe. I call it God. There's just certain things you just can't explain away. You can't say that I met this person at this time, at this place, and they happen to be in the same vicinity as me. Come on. You hear all these stories of how so-and-so met so-and-so, and all of a sudden they do business together. They do, and it becomes this amazing thing. Like, there's just stuff you cannot make up. You can't even write a better story than that. If you can write a better story than that, then you think you're that good. You think you're that smart. I I think I'm not that smart, but I do have moments where I think I'm that smart. But we all do. We all do. But it's important because you cannot elevate to another level unless you deal with the issue of pride. I'm going to say a couple more things and then I'm going to close up. Pride has two ways of showing itself. One, it shows up very boisterous, very much in a way of letting people know I'm in the building. I'm, people that got loud voices or, whatever the case is. They have ways of making themselves known to other people. So if you have to almost project yourself, then that's an issue you have to deal with, because just because you arrived doesn't mean I got to bow down to the fact that you arrived, right? So pride has that way of expression. Now, the other way pride comes in is it comes in a very tempered and very mild-mannered circumstance. So instead of an individual expressing themselves in confidence, what they do is they actually keep themselves from contributing in a higher form. So instead of putting themselves out there, they try to snuff themselves out because they think that their ideas, their participation, and their thoughts, ideas don't matter. So instead of bringing them forward with confidence and actually putting themselves out there to be rejected, possibly rejected, let me say that, they just do it themselves and you just won't hear of them anymore. So pride can actually keep one safe because your lack of contribution also says that you value you over what you've been gifted to give someone. Isn't that crazy? And I would think that many of us are in the latter category, where we think that the gifting that we have is not valuable enough to help someone. So because we don't think our giftings matter, we essentially put them off to the side, we cover them up and hide them so that no one even knows that we're there. Why? To protect ourselves from being rejected. That's pride too, y'all. Someone might need the very gift that you're hiding. I'm going to say that again for myself, not for you, but for myself. People need the very gift that you are hiding from. And isn't it crazy? How often do we do that? There was a quote by Dr. Miles Monroe, the late Dr. Miles Monroe, and I'm going to close with this. He said in many of his great speeches before he died, he said, the most expensive place in the world is the graveyard. Millions of ideas died in the graveyard with the people that God entrusted them with. There will never, no one in this earth, this is the greatest injustice of this thing. There will be ideas that the world has never been able to experience because they died along with those folks. That's crazy, isn't it? So we talked about pride. I know it's a downer, but it has to be set first. This is a tough pill to swallow, really. But how can we, as individuals that recognize I might have a pride issue, how can we position ourselves so that we get into this area called humility? How can we shift from manners and thought processes of pride into a mindset of humility? We'll talk about that in the next podcast of Shifts and Ladders. Take care, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace.